Just a few minutes ago, I had a chat with Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor. I said surely Labour would thoroughly approve of the Chancellor's spending on public services, spending of a magnitude we've not seen since the Blair-Brown years.
Of course, there are things in this budget that we welcome, including some of the additional money for public services. But the key challenges that people are facing right now with the cost of living crisis and looking into a winter when food prices are going up, when the cost of filling your tank with petrol is increasing, and when gas and electricity bills are soaring, there's nothing in the budget today to help people get through those difficult times. For example, a cut in VAT on domestic energy bills, for example, that could have helped people through these difficult winter months, or indeed not going ahead with the increase in national insurance next April, which is going to be taking even more money out of the pockets of hard-working families.
But if you weren't going to go ahead with the national insurance increase, does that mean you would cut some of the public spending he's done?
No, we've said that, of course, the National Health Service needs more money.
But how would you pay for it, then?
Well, we should ask more from those with the broader shoulders. So, for example, if you get your income from stocks or shares or dividends or from a portfolio of buy-to-let properties, you pay nothing more in tax with the national insurance rise. That's not fair, it's not right, and there are different ways of doing this.
But whether that's fair or not, you will have seen that the gross amount that he is raising from the health and social care levy, national insurance, is £17 billion. It's a colossal amount of money. Where are you going to find money like that?
We have said that it is just not right that those people with the highest incomes from stocks, shares, dividends are not being asked to pay a penny more in tax. And so, yes, we need to raise that money to fund essential public services, but not in the way that this government are doing it. And what we see with the budget today is the biggest tax increases in a year, I think, ever. And those taxes are not falling on the banks. The bankers got a tax cut today.
Well, smaller
of
banks.
$4 billion.
Smaller banks got a tax cut. The ones he regards as challenger banks. The big banks are not getting a tax cut.
But yeah, the bank surcharge is being reduced, and that's a £4 billion tax cut for banks. That's not a choice that Labour would be making. Air passenger duty today for domestic flights has been cut. That is not a choice that we would have been making today.
I should point out that you've done what you accused the Chancellor of doing, is you've added together 4 years of the benefit that the banks are getting to come up with your £4 billion. It is significantly less than £1 billion.
So it's £1 billion a year, but this is a spending review, a 5-year spending review, and over the period of that spending review,
sure.
£4 billion
but nonetheless, you attack him
when
he adds together spending commitments, and you're doing exactly the same thing. But look, he thinks that he is making life difficult for Labour. I don't know if you saw the way he trolled you today. We just put a tweet that he put up on the screen over there. You might want to have a look at it, where he is telling you that he's putting 20 million quid into your constituency. I mean, he is making life difficult for Labour. They are spending on things that your voters care about.
Well, instead of tweeting at members of the Labour Party, maybe he could be running the economy. Just a suggestion for the Chancellor there. Of course, we welcome additional funding for our public services, but the key challenge that families, pensioners, people up and down the country are facing right now, the rising prices, inflation set to be twice as high as the Office for Budget Responsibility were forecasting just 6 months ago. Inflation is set to rise to above 4% at the beginning of next year. That is a hefty toll on families who are struggling with the cost of living.
Your big announcement at conference was that you would abolish business rates. Now, he just said to me in an interview I did with him that if he'd announced, this is the Chancellor said to me that if he'd abolished business rates and created a £25 billion black hole, you know, analysts and indeed you would be savaging him. But you haven't said how you're going to find that £25 billion if you abolish business rates.
Well, it's the government who promised a fundamental review and a cut in business rates in their last manifesto. And what we've seen today is just tinkering around the edges.
It's a couple of billion. It's a couple of billion quid a year, certainly next year, and then, you know, it's about 100 billion. It's about £1 billion thereafter. It's not trivial.
Well, I think if you listen to some of the business organisations and people who run high street businesses, they don't feel that this is the fundamental reform that the government promised. But what would Labour do? We would tax higher those online giants who aren't paying their fair share of taxes. You've got a high street business. They're paying business rates. They might be paying a bit of corporation tax if they're raising enough money. But their main competitor might be an online giant who's paying very little in business rates because warehouses aren't taxed in the same way that high street shops are. And they're probably paying no corporation tax in this country either because they're registered overseas. And that's not a level playing field, and that needs to be sorted out. And that's why we've said that we would abolish business rates and replace it with a fairer system of property taxation where we do level the playing field for those small businesses.
This issue that everybody's worried about, which is cost of living. I put to him that he wasn't being green enough because, you know, yet again, he didn't increase fuel duty and he's done this cut in what we pay when we fly long distances.
No, it's not long distances. Well, it's the air passenger duty is on domestic flights. That
there's two things that he's done.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, you've said that you would be the first properly green Chancellor. Now, people hearing that will think, well, you're just going to put up my cost of living.
The only way that you can be a responsible Chancellor today is to be a Green Chancellor. Because the cost
but it is expensive in the
change...
short term, isn't it? Pricing for carbon, which is what's required, will put up really basic costs for people.
So I've said that we would pay for day-to-day spending with day-to-day tax receipts and we would bring down our debt as a share of the economy. But if you make those decisions, that frees up money for the capital investment that we need to create those jobs and opportunities in the future. And that's why I set out a climate investment pledge at conference of £28 billion a year for every year of this decade to tackle the climate emergency and pass on to our children a more sustainable planet. But also, Robert...
But I understand all that, but you haven't addressed how you would protect poor people from the inevitable costs of putting up the price of carbon-emitting fuel.
Well, what I have said is that to get that just transition that we need, to ensure that people aren't having to pay on their own to insulate their homes, that we would have this carbon investment pledge to help people to shift to the low and zero carbon economy. And that's both in terms of insulating people's homes, to reduce energy bills, to keep our homes warmer and to tackle climate change, but also to seize the opportunities here, because there's a global race on of who's going to have the jobs and industries of the future. Germany, the US, other countries around the world are investing in hydrogen, in carbon capture and storage, in gigafactories for electric vehicles. Unless we make these investments, those jobs are not going to come to our shores. That'd be a huge missed opportunity.
Now, sadly, we are almost out of time. Your leader, like many of us who've been double vaxxed, has gone down with COVID. I'm hoping he's feeling all right. How much warning did you have that, actually, almost uniquely, you had to stand in for him on the Great Budget Day?
It's been quite a day, Robert. At 11:30 today, I think it was, Keir tested himself for COVID, did a test, and 15 minutes later I got the news that he had tested positive.
Right. So that's 45 minutes before the speech.
45 minutes to prepare. Now, as you know, my background is as an economist, and thank goodness for that, because that training came in handy today. I had 45 minutes to prepare, and then that time in the chamber to make some additions to the speech, my speech in response on the basis of what the Chancellor said. But it's been quite a day. The House of Commons is always a pretty raucous place to be, but on Budget Day, I've never seen anything like it. But
well, congratulations.
I hope I did my party proud.
I'm not sure anybody would have noticed you only had about sort of half an hour to prepare. But actually, we should point out that on that basis, poor Ed Miliband only had quarter of an hour to prepare for Prime Minister's questions.
Ed has done Prime Minister's questions on a number of occasions before, but he only had 15 minutes to prepare. But, you know, he took the Prime Minister to task today on failing to tackle the climate emergency and seize the jobs and opportunities here in this country. And I hope I did a good job in taking the Chancellor to task in failing to address the cost of living crisis that we're going through right now.
Rachel Reeves, it's so good to see you again. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.